This is Michael Clara coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah. This video is about what happened at the Utah State Records Committee on July 8th, 2021, where a volleyball mom challenged the Alpine School District. And I was helping her through this process, and this video is just going to explain what actually happened at the meeting. At the hearing, I should say. I titled this, The State Records Committee Unmasked the Alpine School District. And what I often tell people that I'm helping through this, it's called the grandma process. I just tell them the fact that we ended up before the State Records Committee tells us that there's a serious breakdown in the way a government bureaucracy operates. And in the state of Utah, this is the state version of FOIA, FOIA being the Freedom of Information Act on the federal level. On the state level, we have GRAMA. And this Government Records Access Management Act was passed by the Utah legislature in 1991. And what happens is in the state of Utah, you file a records request with the governmental agency. And this is kind of a basic overview, and each agency might have another step or two put in. But in this case, Alpine School District follows a state law which says that you file a records request, and if it gets denied, you can appeal it to the chief administrative officer who they designate within the district, who in this case is Rob Smith. And then if he denies the appeal, then you go to the State Records Committee, and if they accept the appeal, then they hear it, and that's how we ended up before the State Records Committee. In that grandma law, there's a Utah code, it's under this section of the code in 63G, but the one that you'll hear us quote a lot, or the part of that code, is that the following records are normally public. Records that would disclose information relating to formal charges or disciplinary actions against a governmental employee. The disciplinary action has been completed, and then the charges of which the disciplinary action was based were sustained. So, like I said, that's what you'll hear us do, as we go through this hearing. And basically what happened here is on October 26, 2020, there was a volleyball game, and this is what the source is of the records request, between Tentview and Mountain View, and the local newspaper wrote an article that says, emotions run high in Mountain View victory over Tentview. Now, let me give you this description of what happened or what's at issue here. And this is from the mom in February files a complaint against his coach with the Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission. And in this video, because it comes up in the hearing, I'll go over what exactly happened at that UPAC hearing. But this is how they describe what happened, what the actions were of the coach that I think capsulizes what happened or what happened on October 26th. It is alleged that on October 27, 2020, Mr. Neely, the Mountain View head coach, during the game engaged in pervasive and persistent taunting, bullying, harassment, belittling, and public embarrassment, specifically targeting one player on the Tentview team. So what happened that night on October 26th was so severe, as they described it based on the allegation they received, that the following day, the athletic director for Tentview files a complaint with the Utah Athletic Association against Coach Dave Neely at Mountain View High School. And she says that, she quotes their policies, that what policies he violated and how they should take disciplinary action on him. And this was in October. Well, fast forward to January, mom finds out that the Utah Athletic Association did nothing with it, kicked it over to the high school. So mom sends an email to Principal Mike ERICKSEN at the high school and says, I'm writing to you today to ask if there was an investigation done on this matter and what the status of that is. I would also like to know what actions Mountain View High School administration took regarding this situation. A couple days later, Mike ERICKSEN replies to her, and he says, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the highlights are, I assure you that we have exhaustively investigated the incident. And then he says, from this investigation and the conclusions drawn, appropriate administrative action was applied. Now, what I want you to do is keep your eye on Mike ERICKSEN throughout this saga, because he is what I would call ground zero of this entire debacle. And let me tell you, this is a man that makes $140,000 a year. And for that amount of money, you would expect a little more from him than what we get as taxpayers. But what I'm concerned about, and this isn't the first time I've intersected with his bad behavior, but what I don't understand is how when I say they, the administration at the Alpine School District allowed this man to operate without any kind of ethical or moral anchors. He just lacks any kind of procedural guidelines that they give him or any kind of solid supervision for all the mess that he causes in that district and at this particular high school. And then, and because they allow people like him to just roam free without any kind of moral compass whatsoever, this makes the Alpine School District just a breeding ground for what I call administrative evil. And it's just pervasive throughout this district on some of the stuff that they do. And what I call administrative evil, it's just a bureaucracy that doesn't follow the policies or the law of its own organization. And people that should be keeping people like this man in check are not doing their job either. So what happens at this particular time, mom, before I go into that, let's go into the hearing, and let's see what right out of the starting gates, this is what the school board attorney tells the committee about what the principal told mom.
Now, the difficulty with there's a couple difficulties with the argument that the petitioner is making. First is that they overlook the qualifier formal. It specifically says relating to formal charges or disciplinary actions. So that's the initial requirement. Was there a formal proceeding? And as the district's response indicates, to this body indicates, it was not.
So I should have pointed out before, but when Patrick Tanner says, when he refers to petitioners, he's referring to me and mom, who are sitting at the table next to him. And so there you have it. The Patrick Turner confirmed, again, mom just found this out last week, but back in January, she had her suspicions that Mike ERICKSEN, the principal at Mountain View, wasn't telling her the truth. So she submits a records request. So what happens is that I think the following day, after he tells her that, she submits a records request to the district and says, I'm requesting a copy of the investigative report. And she sends a copy of ERICKSEN's email and says, this is what he said. So in response, Kimberley Bird, who is the Alpine School District's records officer, she denies the records request. She says, your request for records is denied because they're personnel records and they're not going to be released. So this is what, and then now we have, 6 months later, Patrick Tanner has to admit to the records committee, because one of them asked him after he does his presentation, they just ask him point blank, is it a records, is it a personnel file? And this is what he says in response to that question.
Yes.
And so you're saying that report is kept as the employee's files, personnel files. It's a personnel record. It's kept as personnel file, so it's private.
The way the district keeps its records, they are very limited records in a quote-unquote personnel file. No, it's not in the personnel file.
But you're claiming it's personnel file. Personnel record.
I'm claiming it's a record that is related to this employee, yes, because it was his conduct that was called into question.
Aren't you claiming it's private under 30228?
Yes.
All right.
That concerns me about Kimberly Bird, is that she's a records officer for the district, but according to the state website for records officers, she's not even certified. But my concern is that if we were just talking about incompetence as an issue here, and that could easily be solved by her going to get certified, and maybe she would respond more appropriately to people, because I've been dealing with her for the last several months, helping other parents when they file records requests. Some of her responses are just crazy. I mean, they don't even make sense, and they don't even follow the state law on how she should be responding. But what I'm concerned about is that we're not dealing with incompetence. I think the issue here is more insidious. That she, because now what we've learned so far at this point in the hearing is that Mike ERICKSEN, the principal, lied about doing any kind of investigation, and then when mom goes and does a records request, Bird lies to her and telling her that it's part of the employee file. And then here now you have Tanner exposing her, saying, no, it's not, part of the employee file. So basically you just have the Bird here, who's just clever, in a clever and clandestine way. She evades disclosing that Principal ERICKSEN lied to mom in his email the previous week. So what Volleyball Mom does is she now, sends an appeal to Rob Smith. And she says that, and she wants to clarify with Rob Smith that the only record that Bird says is she's not giving mom are personnel records. And mom says, but that's not what I was requesting. I'm requesting a copy of the exhaustive and thorough investigation that Principal ERICKSEN speaks of, not the personnel records of Dave Neely, the records officer Bird speaks of. And what Rob tells mom is he pivots and he says, well, you can't get his record. We can't give you that investigative report because it involves an evaluation of the employee's performance. It also falls within the scope of performance evaluations. And he says, which is one of the records that are private, so we can't give it to you. And then he takes a shot at mom, saying, other than the incorrect suggestion that an investigative report would not be personnel records of Mr. Neely, you have not provided any other basis for overturning the denial. And he says the denial was correct and your appeal is also denied. So let's listen in what happens here. It's a short take, and this is, I believe this is already after the records committee has gone in camera to look at the document, and when they come out, this is the exchange that they have. It's about 10 seconds long.
Private record. It is not a private record of that sort. There's no evaluation in here.
I'll go into more detail as to that exchange. We'll hear more of that later in the video, but I want to come back to Rob Smith and just say that when I watch him, when he does these kinds of responses, to me, it's just an insidious abuse of power that he exercises, because I believe that in this case, he misconstrued the law and in a manner that can only have been deliberate. And in other words, the other thing that I'm trying to say here is that he breached his duty to uphold the law by being complicit in the deception that the principal Mike ERICKSEN started. Because in this case, what the idea is that you do a records request and it gets denied. The idea is that this man or whoever's in this position is going to be an objective observer and is going to weigh what just happened. And if he had looked into this, he would have had to then release the record. But instead, he tries to give it a different definition, to not disclose it. So I just feel that he could have rectified the principal's deceptions and then Bird's subsequent cover-up, but instead he squandered, what his vital role is in this as an indispensable checks and balance, unfortunately, and became part of the whole, I guess you could call it a cover-up. So, because we've learned that it's not, it's not a private record, and it's not an evaluation like he tried to tell mom in his denial of her appeal. So what happens back in when mom's going through this process, I believe that February 5th was when Rob Smith denies her appeal. But back in January, when mom realized maybe there is an investigation, that was her suspicion at the time. And so she files a complaint with the Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission. And this is going to come up in this hearing, so it's worth going over what happened. And when mom, like I already read you what this was. This is what was on the agenda for UPAC. And I'm sorry, I think that let me go back here for a second and just say what UPAC is. And it says here that, they're a commission that's a committee of 9 educators and 2 community members. And what they do is review complaints against licensed educators. And then my understanding is that they give then recommendations to the State Board of Education regarding disciplinary action based on misconduct complaints that they receive. And so mom files that, and then they hear her allegations on February 12th, and then mom doesn't hear anything from them, so she writes an email to the executive secretary, Ben Rasmussen, and asks him what the outcome was of UPAC's investigation into the allegations she submitted against Coach Neely. And he says that UPAC reviewed the allegations against Coach Neely at its meeting, as well as the findings of the school's investigation. And then he says that UPAC then declines to conduct an investigation because they were best addressed by the school and by Utah Athletic Association. And then what mom does a records request to UPAC and says, you know what, I want to see the email exchanges between Rasmussen and school officials. What she finds out is that back in January, when she filed the complaint, that the HR director, Cammie Larson, and Rasmussen, who's the executive secretary for UPAC, have an email exchange. And let me read this to you. She says, yes, there's a lot going on here. It has been investigated at the school level by Mike ERICKSEN and Rick Stafford, and at the region level by UHSAA. They have made grammar requests as well, and Kimberley PR and Patrick, legal counsel, has been involved. I doubt he has a teacher's license, which he does, but she doesn't. She says she doubts that. But anyways, in this email, she says that an investigation was done on the region level and on the high school level, and that Patrick Tanner is even involved in the whole process. And then there's an email exchange between, then Rasmussen contacts Mike ERICKSEN, and then what happens is, as a result of that, let's go into this, and this is part of what I said at the hearing on behalf of the volleyball mom.
And so this is the first that we're hearing. He's admitted that there is an investigation was done, and even if we put aside the issue of formal and informal, that I don't think is a valid argument. The other part of O says that information relating to formal charges or disciplinary action. It doesn't say formal or informal disciplinary action. It says disciplinary action. And when he says that we're assuming disciplinary action was done, that's inaccurate. We know disciplinary action was done because the district informed the UPAC, which is a commission for the State Board of Education. We have an email here where the HR director from Alpine School District is telling the executive director, yes, there is a lot going on here. It's been investigated at the school level and at the region level with UHSAA, and then he says, and Patrick, which is him, legal counsel, has been involved in this. and then the executive director then explains to the commission in a memo on the agenda of that meeting. He says, Mr. Neely was required to sit out a game after this occurred, and it has been reviewed by UHSAA and addressed appropriately by the school. So an investigation was done. It meets the criteria that we believe that the records committee should compel the district to give us that document.
So as I point out, this is really the first confirmation that we have that investigation was actually done, because at the time, as you can see, there's no way to actually track what was going on. So let me point out here too that going back to the UPAC issue, one of the things that I referred to is that when Rasmussen talks to ERICKSEN and the HR, and he talks to the HR director, I guess it was ERICKSEN that tells him that Neely was required to sit out a game after this occurred. And this is in a memo that Rasmussen, who's the executive secretary for the UPAC, he tells them in a memo, hey, an investigation was done, because that's the information he got. And in fact, Rasmussen tells Mom that UPAC actually reviewed the investigative report. And that's what led us to believe there is an investigative report. Because how could they review an investigative report that didn't exist? This is back in February, we're learning this, Neely then says, we're told that Neely was required to sit out a game. Well, because of that information that the executive secretary gives to the UPAC, the commission, they declined to do an investigation. Because what they were told by the Alpine School District HR director and by the principal, that an investigation was done and the disciplinary action was given. So in the next audio clip, we'll hear from Patrick Tanner, and he's going to reference the statement that I just read.
Furthermore, the other issue with that argument is that all the charges on which the disciplinary action was based were sustained. Okay? Well, that's kind of tricky because you can't know that without looking at, whatever the process was. They're assuming, based on the fact that it's been disclosed that this coach sat out a game, that meant the charges were sustained and that was the discipline imposed. That could be one interpretation, but that's not the only reason that would occur. It may mean that the administration felt, well, the coach could have used better judgment. Maybe it's better just to cool off this situation and not have him appear at the next game. The administration could have said, well, maybe it's just, the public's upset about this and maybe we don't want to, make people upset. And so we'll just kind of, have him not be there and so we don't have further disruptions. There's various reasons for that. And the fact that he sat out a game does not mean that the charges were sustained.
So, there you have his explanation. And, in the hearing, when I heard him say, that the tricky part is kind of tricky because you can't know without knowing the process is right. I wanted to say exactly that's all there shouldn't be any tricky part for anybody. This is a public agency. And really the tricky part is the district's manipulation and misrepresentation of their actions throughout this whole process. And so anyways, that's the hand we've been dealt. So here's some more of Patrick Tanner on.
And that's the reason. With regard to the assertion about disciplinary action, he certainly didn't quote what the HR director said to UPAC. Now, how UPAC understood it or whatever, I acknowledged and the district acknowledged that he sat out a game. And for the reasons I said, that's not necessarily a disciplinary action imposed. There's various ways and reasons and things that was done. But in any case, you only get to that if it's a formal proceeding and if the charges are sustained. And they weren't.
So now we move into the State Records Committee is moving into the deliberation process.
Any other questions? Thank you. We'll move into deliberation. Did you say you brought the investigative report?
Yeah.
And I think we need to see it.
Absolutely.
I would like to make them, how many pages is it?
It is, and it's like the investigation, it's informal. It's 6 pages.
6 pages. I'd like to make a motion to go into camera to review the record.
Second. Okay, we have a motion to go in camera to review the record by Patricia and a second by Tom. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. We're going in camera.
All right, so what they do next, as they indicated,
Thank you.
they go
We'll move
into
deliberation.
what they call in-camera review, and so they left the room and went into a closed session, and basically what they're doing is as I said, they're reviewing the document that the district gave it all kinds of definitions, from evaluation to part of the personnel file, and again, it just depended what administrator mom had to interact with, and she got a different lie each time. But fortunately, because this is a state law, we were able to end up before the State Records Committee, and the lies were all exposed. And here's what the determination was of the Records Committee.
These type of records are not private records of the sort of classified under 3022A. They might be more properly classified under 30510, which is an administrative purpose for discipline or whatever. And then there's the five instances that it may be classified as protected, none of which hold up in this particular instance. And the reason I say that these are not private is because often when someone is, and was it the assistant, who was it reviewing, providing, the person I think it was, you said it was the assistant principal, right? Yes. Doing the review, talks to people and gets their information. Well, if he's talking to other people, provides their names, which is not this case, I want to make sure it's not this case, but it's the fact that, then you certainly wouldn't give that information to the employee either. So that's counterintuitive of it being a private record. It is not a private record of that sort. There's no evaluation in here. There are statements of what happened, none of which I see are either private or protected. So I think that in this case, we have a public record and it should be released.
It is certainly a record of a public event.
It's a record of a public event. Yes,
It's one side's view of what happened.
it's one side's view of what happened.
Yep.
Giving a view doesn't make it private, doesn't make it protected.
Well, I find no classification that would, because as you always point out to us, all records are public unless
Unless.
it's not an employee record. I don't want to repeat what you said, but it's a report about a public event.
And it's not even really well, I guess they're calling it a report, but generally an accounting.
Yeah.
Guess you can call it a report, but I would classify it more as an accounting that they tried to do quickly to find out, and it was their perspective, and to write it down. So I guess I'll make a motion that this record is a public record and therefore should be released to the petitioner.